Hey guys, what's up? I'm Kit. This is Schizo Kitso. It's time to get crazy. So I made a previous video about my experience in a psych ward. Like, what was the day like of being in a psych ward? And I made sure I kept a journal my entire time I was there. I was there in May 2019 for a week, and I made sure I recorded everything. So one of the things I recorded was a schedule about what a day in the life of a psych patient is like. And so I made a previous video. I will put it up here in the cards just in case you haven't managed to watch it yet, and that's totally okay. But I'm gonna continue that video and basically do a part 2 of what it's like to be in a psych ward. 12:45 was outdoor time, which, as I told you in my previous video, was code for a smoke break for those that smoked. And there was this guy who, you're not allowed to share cigarettes with people. And so this guy had managed to get a cigarette from another person. And one of the PCAs, a patient care assistant, kind of caught him doing that. And they said, "Hey, what are you doing with that cigarette? I know you didn't bring it." And so this guy spun this elaborate lie about how he bought the cigarette from a store that was in the outdoor section of the mental hospital, and how he talked about how he got the money, he talked about the person who was behind the counter, he went on and on and on about this, and it was such an elaborate lie, and he kept on going, and he managed to smoke his entire cigarette. And the PCA just let him do it. I think the PCA was impressed like I was. I was writing everything down in my journal, but it was like really elaborate. I was like, dang, okay, all right, keep going, dude, keep going. At 1 o'clock was MedPass/personal time. So if you didn't have to take meds 3 times a day, you could sit in the main room and talk with your clique or whoever you were talking to, yes, that. Thank you, Lamictal, for messing up my words. At 1:30, we had group therapy. I remember a specific group therapy session where we talked about triggers and things that triggered us. And basically, it was stuff I already knew, and so I listened, I participated, and that was it. At 2:30, we had recreation therapy. Now, multiple times during the week I was there, they actually brought a Labrador Retriever onto the unit so that we could pet and hang out with this dog. And that really meant a lot to me, that I was able to interact with an animal that also cared about me, so it was very relaxing and nice. So I enjoyed that part of recreation therapy. At 3:30, we had yet more outdoor time, smoke break, whatever you want to call it. So by this point, it was in the middle of May, like I mentioned before, and it was hot. So by this point, the weather would be cooling off a little bit. The sun would be kind of low in the sky. And while the sun did shine on me at this point, I remember that, I still wrote in my journal, I still had a good time. People still smoked, people played on the basketball court, had a good time, and yeah, so more outdoor time, more peaceful time for Kit, more time for Kit to write in her journal, and that was it. I'll be quick. 4 o'clock, exercise time. As you guys know from my previous video, I did not bring pants to the mental hospital, so I obviously did not participate. At 4:30, it was personal time yet again. So I was on a unit called the Meadows unit, and the Meadows unit actually had 2 parts to it. So there was one unit on one side, and there was my unit that I was on, and there was a door in between. So we got to, during personal time, interact with the people on the other side of the unit. And I met a guy, we're gonna call him Steve. So Steve would often play King's Corners with me. I managed to get a deck of cards halfway through the week from my dad, and King's Corners is a card game that apparently people play a lot in prison, because Steve claimed to have just finished serving a 20-year sentence for murder in prison, but he never once admitted to me that he actually killed anybody. And I was like, okay, all right, I'm in a mental hospital, this guy's probably lying. But he talked about prison like he'd been there before, and I've watched a few prison YouTubers, so it's quite possible that it actually happened, but I didn't think too much about it. He was pretty good at cards, and I had a lot of fun playing cards with him. So we would basically play cards, talk about life, I'd talk about my habits, he would talk about his habits, and we'd have a grand old time during personal time in the evening. 5:15 was dinner time. So I love eating, so I was really excited to line up for dinner time, and there was this girl who would often scream when we were going to dinner or going to lunch or going to breakfast, because she believed that the psychiatric hospital was run by a king, that she was the psychiatrist of the psychiatrist that saw all of us, and she would be really loud about it, and I'm pretty sure she was psychotic. There's no way she wasn't psychotic. And we just basically would kind of like shy away from her because we were afraid of her yelling. Which is really sad, because people like that, they need friends too, but Nobody I was with wanted to be friends with her because she would just yell all the time, so we just kind of kept our distance and ate our dinner. 6:30 was outdoor time. As I told you guys before, I would go out with the smokers, I would have a good time, but it was also personal time. So if I wanted to stay inside and talk with my clique, talk with Steve, you know, kind of play more cards, I could do it during this time as well. So like going through the week, I would do things with my friends, I would go to group therapy, I would do recreation therapy, but no matter what, the best time of the day was in the evening at 6:45 to 7:45 when we would have visitation. So we would go actually to, I mentioned before that there was another unit next to mine. So we would go over to that secondary unit, we would sit in chairs and our family members and our friends would come and visit us, and it was the best part of the day. I cannot stress that enough. That was the best part of the whole day because it made everything worth it at that point, because I got to see my family, I got to see my friends. I got to be visited. 8 o'clock was what was called nursing group and med pass. So this is when I would receive my nightly medications. This was when I refused my lithium, but it was where I took all my other meds that I was on. Nursing group, none of us ever really figured out what that meant. It was on the schedule, but it never really happened, if that makes sense. I don't know. It was weird. 8:45 was goal review. Goals that we made when? I don't know, but it was on the schedule. 9 o'clock was the last outdoor time of the day. And I remember specifically at one point in the middle of the time I was there, I would be sitting outside under that covered area and it would be thunderstorming. Like it was lightning, there was thunder. The people who were smoking had to stand out in the rain because they couldn't smoke under the covers. They were standing out in the rain smoking as it was thundering and lightning, and it was just a really interesting experience for me. 9:15 was our final personal time. This is when the cards would finally be put up. We would all say our goodnights and we would all go to sleep. And 10 o'clock was lights out. Other stuff I'd like to mention is that we had psychiatrist appointments multiple times throughout the week. So we would go see our psychiatrist. We all had the same psychiatrist. So we would go see the psychiatrist. He would up our meds or lower our meds or do whatever with our meds, and then they would be reflected during med pass. Also, we would have therapy times. So for me, I actually never got a therapy session between when I first showed up and when I left, which I thought was really interesting given I was at a mental hospital. But a lot of people had therapy sessions multiple times while I was there with different therapists, and that was just something that wasn't necessarily on the schedule, just like the psychiatrist appointments were on the schedule, because they kind of just pulled us off to the side when it was time for those things. I hope this video gave you a little bit more insight into what it's like in a psychiatric institution. But I'm gonna cut the video here, and I'm gonna thank you guys once again for helping me make the uncomfortable comfortable. Bye bye.